Okay, so where were we? Oh right, Sakura Quest. No, stop it. Stop it. You had your time in the sun, now give someone else a turn. I'll see you on Saturday. Anyways, back on topic, I wasn't actually planning on making a video about this show until fairly recently. Not that I wasn't enjoying the series, but after being, I think, spoiled by the slice of life genre last season with Demi-chan and Maid Dragon, the bar had been set understandably high. And while I still think those shows are better, at least for me, I can't deny there is something special about Sakura Quest. So without further delay, I'm gonna try to tell you what that something is. Let's do this. Okay, first some background. Sakura Quest is the latest show from PA Works, the studio responsible for making everyone's favorite anime about making anime, Shirobako. Like its spiritual predecessor, it is an anime original series, flying without the guide of any source material. This can be advantageous because it means there's no need for filler arcs while the manga gets ahead. There's also no existing fanbase hungry for and potentially critical of the adaptation. But while it's true that no light novel or manga exists for Sakura Quest, this is not PA Works' first foray into the subgenre of adult girls doing adult things. With the aforementioned Shirobako receiving a good amount of praise, I think Sakura Quest found itself with some unexpected shoes to fill. And at least so far, it doesn't seem like people think it's done a good job of stepping into them, which is unfortunate, but we'll get into potential comparisons between the two a little later on. Sakura Quest starts off by following Yoshino Koharu, a recent college graduate struggling to find a job. So definitely not someone people can relate to in a situation that totally doesn't cause any of us anxiety. Anyway, desperate for a job, she decides to accept a gig that involves being the queen of the rural town of Manoyama for a day. Or at least that's what she thinks the deal is, but as it turns out, instead of just posing as queen for some kind of Disney parade or ceremony, she instead learns her contract is for a year and she's in charge of helping revitalize this small town. And so you might expect that this show then starts to follow a typical narrative arc where our protagonist finds themselves in an unfavorable situation only to grow to love it by the end. And you'd be right, at least initially, but by the time the gorgeous end credits roll at the end of episode 3, it's clear this is not just Yoshino's story. She's joined by 4 other young women. You've got Shiori, Maki, Ririko, and Sanae. They've all found themselves in Manoyama for one reason or another, and they all end up working for the tourism board with Yoshi. And this is where the show really starts to shine, in my opinion. The growing interactions and chemistry between these 5 starts slow and subtle, but is ultimately incredibly satisfying to watch. Each of them bounce off and interact with each other through conversations that feel, well, realistic. And I think that's a great word to describe this series as a whole: realistic. Now that may lead you to think that it's boring, especially when this is apparently supposed to be a comedy series. While this show hasn't quite left me in stitches, I also don't see it purely as a comedy like many sites seem to suggest it is. That said, the primary source of humor in Sakura Quest doesn't come from outright jokes or gags, but rather it stems from those character interactions. And so as the group dynamic forms and starts to change, so too does the comedy. Sometimes it might just be a joke in the middle of a conversation, other times it might be someone adhering to their role in a humorous way, or finding a way to buck a trope that is unexpected yet not totally out of character. Really, I think the comedic elements of this show are perfect for a series well entrenched in the slice of life genre. And it's this idea of realism that's reinforced throughout the series in everything from the consequences our main cast must deal with, to the fact that each character has an increasing number of well-designed and unique outfits that they rotate through as episodes and days pass. It's such a small thing that PA Works has done an outstanding job with, and it really makes you feel like these are actual people. But before we get too sucked into Manoyama Fashion Week, let's backtrack for a second and talk about those consequences I mentioned. Much of the time in animation, particularly with comedies, you have consequences, yes, but more often than not, they leave no real lasting impact on the characters or the world they inhabit. And that's perfectly fine. As I discussed in my look at Konosuba, you don't watch these shows for their plot or deep character growth. Sakura Quest is different though, and a good part of that is due to it not being, at least in my mind, entirely a comedy. Their actions have effects that don't always reset at the start of a new episode. The show gives adequate time to flesh out each character, each conflict, and everything that influences, from the current tourism project they're working on to their growing relationships with one another. There really hasn't been a plotline so far that's been contained entirely in one episode. This can make the pacing feel slow though, which might in turn make you think the show is boring at times, like nothing significant is happening. I understand that criticism and honestly think it's a fair one, especially if you're having trouble relating to the premise or characters. This is a problem though that its spiritual predecessor Shirobako seemingly didn't share, despite the main cast also being working women in their 20s. But I also think Shirobako had a built-in advantage in its premise that Sakura Quest just doesn't. It's an anime about making anime, so odds are if you're watching it, you have at least a passing curiosity in the medium. So even if you can't relate, there is still that hook of getting to see what it might be like behind the scenes. The nature of Shirobako also ensures that the pacing will be anything but slow. Anime is often produced on a week-to-week basis, with different parts of the studio always in motion, be it storyboarding, animation, or editing. Near endless streams of communication means that someone is always doing something and there's no time for rest. We get a sense of this pace right away as the series starts off with what is essentially a drag race to pick up some frames of animation. And it's this fast pacing that can also make the stakes in Shirobako feel much higher than they seem in Sakura Quest. If some process in the pipeline messes up or falls behind, the consequences are felt immediately. Someone has to pick up the slack, and even if that solves the problem for now, it might mean just creating another problem for a future episode. It really is this multifaceted domino effect week to week with Shirobako, so as a viewer, you know consequences can carry over. Heck, if you want to get meta with it, you might start thinking about what production issues they ran into with this episode you're watching right now. Contrast this with Sakura Quest, where Yoshino has an entire year to revitalize Monoyama. Yes, it's a monumental task, but when you're given so much time, any immediate actions and consequences don't seem nearly as significant. We also know that Monoyama will continue on to some degree no matter what Yoshino does. And even if the town does happen to die, it will be a quiet death that won't happen overnight. People will grow up and move out. The elders will wither and pass away in their sleep as Monoyama slowly drowns in the inevitable sands of time. I changed my mind, guys. I think this is actually a horror series. But no, in reality, Sakura Quest is almost the antithesis of Shirobako in terms of pacing. With the latter, there's the threat of an episode being delayed, someone losing their job, or maybe even the studio going under if things go far enough south. And it might seem like I'm making Shirobako out to be the better show because of these aspects, but if you're watching Sakura Quest expecting tense moments and looming deadlines, you're gonna have a bad time. The reason why I've come back to this series week after week is it just relaxes me and puts me in a good mood. It's incredibly chill, and I enjoy watching each interaction between these 5 girls, no matter how simple it may be. Monoyama's fate may come more into play towards the end of the series, but for right now, I'm just having fun with the ride. It is slow at times, but I think in this case that's an advantage for the kind of story they're trying to tell. You shouldn't head into this show expecting Shirobako 2.0. I wasn't, and I honestly came out on the other side with an unexpected lesson in chemistry and characters that ultimately left me with a nice warm feeling. Those are just my opinions though, and you likely have different ones. Have you watched Sakura Quest before? If so, what do you think? Will you consider it after this video? Whatever your thoughts are, you can let me know down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to leave a like. If you want, follow me on Twitter. That's the best place to get in contact with me if you ever want to chat, or to see when I tweet anime memes at politicians. You can click over here on the left to subscribe, and this week I'm going to do something a little different. If you want to learn more about those warm feelings the series left me with, then I recommend checking out Second Look's video on the series. It'll be on the top right here, and if you want to watch some of my other content, there's a playlist right below that. I'll see you guys next time.